after Arc 5, I was pretty surprised this happened so early, especially considering there wasn't some kid with a bunch of performaclowns saying, "Ladies and gentlemen!" Hello guys, I'm Yusaku here, and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains Episode 5 review. Now in this episode, we're already getting a nice throwback to the first episode when Kusanagi said he hopes one day he'll be able to see Yusaku smile while dueling again, and that perhaps the data storm, if he ever encountered it, would be able to do that. Turns out it took a combination of things, being Go, Onizuka, and the data storm, but here we are. He's already smiling, and I think that's an awesome indication of how his relationship with Go will work. Yusaku may be the better duelist, but I think he's going to be very reliant on Go to develop as a character as we move along and regain some of that, I don't want to use the word innocence, but it's the best I can think of, that allows him to smile and enjoy himself more, because right now he's just been an all-around edgelord, hence why I was so surprised he smiled this early in the show. I thought that was going to be a development we saw like around episode 30 or 40. And this is also a really good indication for Go being relevant to the story, because, let's face it, the past two intended best friend characters within the writing of Arc 5 and Zexal respectively didn't end up playing very much of a role at all after the first, 10-15 episodes at all. Tetsuo from Zexal just ended up fading into the background. We barely even got to see him duel very much. And then we had John Genzuka from Arc 5, who also seemed to sort of slim into the background after we had that first arc. As soon as we moved into Synchro, he seemed to be just fading away in terms of relevance, other than once in a while trying to give Yuya a motivational speech. But yeah, Go really got through to Yusaku and seems to be the first other duelist who Yusaku's acknowledged with a large amount of respect. He chose to stay in that duel. He explained later in the episode, towards the very end, that to Kusanagi, that there are some duels you just never want to end because he was just really enjoying himself, and he acknowledges the fact that part of the reason he stayed in the duel in his list of 3, as always, was because Go was a first-rate duelist. He stuck to his style regardless of the scenario that was before him. And as a result, I think the show greatly benefits from the fact that he stayed in this duel. If he wouldn't have, I don't think we would have seen motion towards Yusaku developing as a character for a lot of episodes to come. And let's face it, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonists, their development being consistent and well layered throughout the show hasn't exactly always been a strong suit. Similar to how Go managed to reach Yusaku's heart as a duelist, he also seemed to manage to reach the children at the orphanage's hearts. I mean, they go from being constantly willing to fluctuate who they were rooting for, switching back and forth between Playmaker and him the entire time, to, by the end of the show, when Go shows up back in his training area, completely defeated, they're cheering for him as loud as they've ever cheered. I think they've come to understand that you don't necessarily have to be the winner to be someone who is rooted for and who is really well appreciated. So as a result of all this, I think Go's really fitting the role of potentially being Yusaku's best friend who's a duelist. I mean, Kusanagi's probably his overall best friend, but nonetheless, really well. I think he's living up to the bar Joey set back in Duel Monsters, because, as I already mentioned, my thoughts on Zexal and Arc 5, those characters seem to become a little bit less relevant the further the show progressed. Then we go back on to 5Ds, and everybody seemed to become a little bit less relevant, aside from Yusei, as the show progressed past the Darksiders arc. And then we go into GX, where you actually had two different best friends, which subtracts from the relevance a little bit, being Jesse and Cyrus. So nobody's been quite as stable as Joey was in Duel Monsters, Joey oftentimes serving as like a dual main protagonist. And maybe Go will come to do that too. I would certainly like to see that. I think he's got that kinder side that at the moment Yusaku's kind of lacks. He's got a bit of a hard edge to him yet, and Go seems to be shaving that off slowly. So let's move on to Yusaku a little bit. In this episode, he really solidified how strong he actually is as a duelist and how quickly he is able to pick up and learn about things. he linked summon not once, twice, or 3 times, but 4 times in a row this episode to overcome Go Onizuka. In terms of combos we've seen from a main character, I think this is the most fast-paced chain of actions we've seen from them this early in a show ever, and probably in the first like 20 to 30 episodes ever from any of the main character duelists, or from any duelist period in the first 30 episodes, which I think is setting a tone for Vrains, once more maybe not putting as much emphasis on these long drawn-out duels, but rather the plotline, which Arc 5 began to do to some extent, though some people would argue sometimes they messed up and rushed it a little too much, and I can see where they're coming from with that. Additionally, I like how much they are connecting previous episodes into later episodes like this, even though we're only 5 episodes in as of yet, because they reinforced how quick Yusaku is able to learn by him using a strategy demonstrated by AI in the second episode. Ai ends up not telling Yusaku how abilities work in speed duels at all, so that way Yusaku is stuck using the ability that Ai wants him to, which is grabbing a card from the data storm. Ai is freaking out because Yusaku let his life points drop below 1,000, but why did he do that? To activate his ability in this episode. The same exact strategy Ai wanted him to use in episode 2 that got him the win, and that ends up getting him the win here. So Yusaku seems to have already learned and sort of begun to master the techniques behind speed dueling, how link summoning works, and everything else. I mean, he did it 4 times in a row. And Go doesn't seem to be any slouch himself. I mean, we saw him practicing speed dueling, last episode? And now he's suddenly riding along the data storm just as well as Yusaku is and keeping up. So I think we're seeing 2 very swift learners who are also learning from each other. I mean, Go, by the end of the episode, seems much more okay with being defeated because he seems to have learned how to respect not necessarily always winning from having lost to Yusaku. And Yusaku seems to have been starting to unlock the ability to enjoy dueling again thanks to Go. I just like the way they played off each other, and I think that's what made this duel actually pretty fun to watch. That and the constant retie-ins to wrestling, such as the 3-count thing. And speaking of the 3-count thing, I'm wondering if that maybe counts as Go's connection to the number 3? I know that's a bit of a stretch considering Revolver and Yusaku, who are both definitely connected to the number 3, outright made a 1, 2, 3 type of observation, versus Go's connection would just be a 3 count. But regardless, they're both number 3. It's a loose theory, but it might be something. I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Go, Yusaku, and Revolver all connected, though at that point I would dare to say the people connected to the other Signer Bird type creatures probably also have something to do with the number 3. Outside of Yusaku and Go's duel, we didn't really get a whole lot involving the other characters in this episode, though I'd like to point out just a couple of brief things before wrapping this up. The first one being, Akira seems completely to have just given up on Go once he sees that he lost, which I think solidifies how independent and probably self-centered he is in a lot of ways. I mean, Go came in and was helping him and working with him, and Akira just doesn't care that he lost. He's done with him. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't talk to Go again unless he absolutely has to due to the circumstance, or unless Go initiates the communications. And then we also have the manager for Go Onizuka, who I thought it was really funny because he was the only one who seemed to grasp the idea that no, Yusaku didn't really make a total misplay by taking all that damage, and he actually planned to take all that damage to maybe do something else. He was the only one who didn't question Yusaku's skill there, which I think is pretty cool, how they made the manager the most clever one out of all of them when he may not even duel at all. And then lastly, we have Yusaku and Kusanagi's little conversation at the very end of the episode when Kusanagi suggests, well, maybe we can get Go's help to the fight. And Yusaku just outright turns him down. He said, no, I don't want him involved in something this dangerous. I think this could reveal one of 2 things with Yusaku. It either reveals that he's still extremely hard-edged and doesn't want to let anyone fully in. I mean, he completely denies Kusanagi's help to escape the duel earlier in the episode, and just his overall edginess in previous episodes, I think, definitely hints towards that being the possibility that he just doesn't want to ever let someone fully into his life, and he fears having a dueling comrade would start to break down those boundaries. Or it's also possible that that's him showing genuine care for a duelist that he respects and not wanting to see him get hurt, seeing as how we've already seen the Knights of Hanoi outright probably kill people within the VR world. I mean, we're not positive on that, but it seems to be the case based off what they've implied. So, I don't know. It's interesting to see how that'll play out. I think it also shows that Kusanagi's a lot more open to help with his cause. than Yusaku is, and I think maybe that will come to an interesting dialogue later, where maybe Kusanagi brings someone in to help behind Yusaku's back because they really need it, and then they end up arguing over it. So I think that pretty much wraps it up, guys, in terms of my thoughts on this episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. Be sure to let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Are you enjoying Vrains so far? Do you think Yusaku and Go will end up being a sort of tag team down the road, and if so, how far down are we going to have to wait? Is Go filling a similar road to Joey, or am I just absolutely full of crap? And don't be afraid to tell me that if you think I am. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and if you didn't, constructive criticism is always welcome. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.